Thank you. Thank you, Governor Walz. Tim, you know, you have served your state and country in so many ways, as he just spoke about, and you kept us safe during your time in the Army National Guard, which, of course, you know, our son Bo was Army National Guard, so that has a special place in my heart. And you've shaped minds, young minds as a high school teacher. And you took what you learned in those, in that critical role to Capitol Hill and the State House here in Minnesota. And I know, as a fellow educator, Gwen never lets you forget us teachers, right? And you've seen over your lifetime growing up just, you know, how much our educators do to serve their students and how important this conversation is to have. And in fact, that's why you fought so hard your entire career to make sure that schools and students have what they need. So thank you for your work and all you've done for your campaign, for our campaign. And I want to thank John and Abigail and you for being on our team. So thank you, Amy. And Congresswoman Craig, you've been a long-time advocate for Minnesota's students, and especially for the kind of 21st century training that creates good paying middle-class jobs. And you know that education changes lives, and I want to thank you for joining us. And thank you to Dr. Stalock and Principal Glynn for welcoming me to Jeffers Pond School. So it's wonderful to be back here in Minnesota, the home state of many of our dear friends, and the Mondales. I'm hoping to talk to Fritz later this morning. The Humphreys, yes, that's how far back Joe and I go. The Wellstones, the Daytons, you know, Joe and I have so many special relationships here. And, you know, even after more than 30 years of teaching, I still get excited at the start of every new school year. And I know that all of you feel the exact same way. And I love the possibility of brand new clean notebooks. The smell of freshly waxed floors, which I actually happen to notice, you know, that's the start of the school year and what you see. And I love the sounds, the quiet just before the students shuffle in, the murmur of ideas, you know, bouncing back and forth as we explore the world together. And I love that nature classroom that you have. I mean, that's spectacular. And the laughter and the tiny moments of surprise that you find in materials that you've taught like a million times. And a few weeks ago at the Democratic National Convention, I spoke to the American people from my classroom, where I used to teach high school at Brandywine High School. I mean, it was so cool to just walk back in there after all these years. And it just brought back all these memories, as I'm sure you all feel as you walk back into your classrooms. And I chose that space because I wanted to lift up our profession. And, you know, because our profession just helps shape who I am. And teaching is more than a job to me. Like all of you, you know, it's a calling. And I know that all of you here feel the same way. And, you know, this year, as Amy referenced, I mean, these feelings of excitement have turned into anxiety. You know, the playgrounds are still, and some classrooms are dark, as the bright young faces that should fill them now are now confined to boxes on a computer screen. And while some classrooms are open, they are full of unknowns. All summer long, friends and family and educators, colleagues, they've all been calling me and texting me. I'm sure you're all getting the same thing. And they're saying, will the schools open? Should we send our kids if they do open? And how am I supposed to juggle working while overseeing my kids' learning? And how do I keep my family safe? So school is going to start here at Jeffers Pond tomorrow. And students will learn with a combination of attending class in person and remote learning. And with guidance from Governor Walz and the leadership of the principal, there is a plan for keeping the students safe. Still, we all know that there are going to be challenges, especially for those families who are sharing devices at home or whose parents are essential workers. And I know that there are a lot of educators and parents who are losing sleep with anxiety and worry right now. Still, schools are finding ways to make do, getting food to hungry children, and making sure everyone has the broadband they need, which is right on Amy's to-do list. So educators, advocates, and parents are bringing every ounce of creativity and care and love to making sure that students don't fall behind. Because that's what we do. Find ways to make something good out of nothing, to see beauty in challenges, to mentor and guide children even through the chaos. And across this country, Americans in all walks of life are putting their shoulders back and fighting for each other. And we have not given up. We just need leadership worthy of our nation, worthy of all of you. So no one knows resilience like my husband, Joe. He's faced his share of trials and tragedies. And our family has been knocked down, and our hearts have been shattered. And through it all, Joe learned how to heal a broken family, the same way you heal a nation. With love and understanding and small acts of kindness, with bravery and with unwavering faith. You show up for each other in big ways and small ones, again and again. And he will show up for you. He's ready to get to work to make our schools safe and equitable for all children on day one. And he knows that schools are going to need funds to help keep staff and students safe with protective gear. And they're going to make sure that your classrooms can physically distance and make sure that students have access to broadband and other technology if we continue to rely on remote learning. Both students and educators are going to need more mental health support to deal with the trauma of this pandemic. And going forward, we're going to have to make big changes to the status quo, because this crisis has shined a bright light on the systemic inequities in our education system. We need to identify best practices to address those gaps and provide funding to implement them. When Joe is president, he and Vice President Kamala Harris are going to make sure that we do all those things. But most of all, Joe knows that the best policies don't come from politics. They come from educators, parents, and students. And Joe is going to listen. So that's why I'm here today, and why I've been on my back-to-school tour, visiting cities across this country, to listen to you, to better understand what each community, your community, what you need, whether it's serving students of color, English language learners, students with disabilities, low-income families, or rural students. So we're going to talk about access to technology, food insecurity, and mental health support. And then I'm going to take this all back to our campaign so that we're ready on day one to turn this around. So I want to thank everyone for being here today and for sharing your stories with me. And now I'll pass it back to Governor Walz. Governor Walz?
Thank you, Dr. Biden. Thank you for inspiring us. Thank you talking about what's possible. Thank you for remembering how strong we are when we come together. And so now we're going to get opportunity, and each of these are leaders. These are our educators. These are our role models for our students out there doing the job. And when we put out policies from Minnesota Department of Education or Minnesota Department of Health, we take great care in understanding the real world impact that that's going to make. And these are the voices that have continued to speak back to us, knowing that we have to do and continue to do better for our students. So I'm going to ask questions here quickly of each of you, if you could. These are things that are coming from teachers, they're coming from parents, they're things that are out there. I'd like you to introduce yourself briefly and then answer the question. Denise, I'll start with you, who's our President of Education Minnesota. You're a fourth-generation educator and one of our state's foremost advocates on behalf of teachers and children. Could you describe some of the creative and innovative ideas you've seen being developed by Minnesota's teachers to support and assist their students during this transition from virtual, hybrid, and distant learning, and some of those challenges? So, Denise?
Thank you. Dr. Biden, am I on?
I think so.
It'll come on? Okay. Dr. Biden, first of all, thank you for being here. I heard your husband introduce you one time, and he said that education isn't what you do, it's who you are. And that has stuck with me since I heard that, and I know that it's absolutely true for everybody sitting at least in this circle. And I can't wait for you to hear from the educators share their stories. You know, it's really, I'm Denise Speck, President of Education Minnesota. I'm an elementary teacher, now serving as President of Education Minnesota. We are the Union of Educators, 86,000, and we represent 55,000 educators in schools like this, our E12 system. And it's really hard for me to sum up one or two examples of the work that is happening all over the state, but I will say this. This spring, educators all over the state turned their practice upside down to move into distance learning on a dime, to serve families and students all over the state, not only in keeping learning going from a distance, but also ensuring that there was childcare at all of the sites and food served to all of the families. And this was a Herculean feat. Everybody in the system, the educators, the administrators, and everybody in between, bus drivers on down. So that happened, and here we are today, now continuing that path of turning our practice upside down. Some of us are doing it at a distance, and we're doing it at a distance better than we did in the fall. We learned a lot, but we're also doing it in places where there's still issues around technology and access to broadband and everything that goes with that. And some of us are doing it in person, and we are doing it through masks and trying to keep kids safe and trying to be the best connector to our communities and the families that we serve. It's hard work, but what I know about Minnesota educators is that they are committed, dedicated professionals with the skills to do this. And they are rolling up their sleeves and making the best out of this. But it has been very hard. I'm not going to lie. It has been very difficult. Many people that already spoke mentioned the anxiety and the stress and the unknowns. I would say this, educators would be in a better place today if we had had the Biden-Harris reopening plan. I can't stress enough the significance of that HEROES Act to bring funding to our schools so that they can not only provide PPE and safety protocols, but the necessary staff to be educating distantly, even in a hybrid situation. It's all about bringing together the best scientists and the best experts to figure out where we go from here. It's a national clearinghouse of best practices that they have in their plan. It's dedicated professional development and resources to help educators change and evolve their practice in challenging times. These are the kinds of things that our states need. And as Governor Walz said, there is universal agreement that funding and a national strategy would have helped us here in our states. So with that, I'm going to offer up my time to the rest of the educators who are going to tell fabulous stories about what they're seeing. But I just want you to know that Minnesota educators are up for the challenge, but we need support and assistance. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Denise. Our next teacher, Justin Schramm, is the Prior Lake High School Band Director. Justin, you were recently named the Distinguished Young Band Director Award recipient by the American School Band Directors last year. I'm interested, and I think all of us are interested in hearing the importance of arts education to students in creative ways you're teaching music to your students during this time of COVID-19. So Justin, introduce yourself and take it away.
Justin Schramm, Band Director at Prior Lake High School. Thank you, Governor and Dr. Biden, for being here. It was in March of last year. We celebrate Music in Our Schools Month every year, and we always put on a concert. And getting ready for this concert, we asked the students to sit at home, find a piece of music that they connected with. It could be anything. I did not care what genre it was, but something that spoke to them. And in the process, they were supposed to write their statement of music, a personal, authentic statement that really came from their heart. And so we collected these statements, we posted them anonymously around our music suite, and we had students go and look and read what their classmates had said. And they found the common themes. They saw their authentic voices of their friends and neighbors, and everything came to light. The themes of performing, responding, creating, but also of community, belonging, emotional connectedness, finding one's soul. And that in and of itself, it wasn't me telling the students or why the arts mattered. The students told each other. And I think when we're going through what we're going through in this country now, that's what we need. We need the connection, the community. They need to feel like they belong, not just to themselves, but to the broader community at large. We took those statements and we played our last concert, the second to last day of in-class of the 2020 school year. We did a mass piece. We had 170 students play this piece together, and a few students read their statements over the top of the music. To say there were some tears in the audience would be a complete understatement, but it kind of encompassed perfectly what the year needed to be. So we went into distance learning after that, and our focus was always on the individual student. They all were coming with their own story, their own life that they now were getting put into at their home. And what we do in the classroom may not work for all of them. So we had students set up, we were in solo ensemble unit, so every student had a solo that they were going to prepare. They videotaped themselves, they had journal entries to set goals, reflect, and find issues that they wanted to fix and accomplish that through the quarter. But we know that for other students, playing their instrument at home isn't a possibility. They either live in apartments or their parents are working at home. It's just not going to work. And so we had to alter course and really focus on what each individual student needed in that time. And so we created a series of assignments that allowed the students to explore music in different ways than maybe we traditionally did in the performance-based classes. Some students researched how music impacted their family. Others proposed projects, and we got some new compositions from those students. This year, our theme is survival of the flexible, because that's truly where we are. What does each student need? How can we be flexible, and how can we give it to them? You know, this past week, we were able to have a modified band camp. Students had masks on. They have holes in their mask, so their mouthpiece fits inside their mask. They have covers on the end of each bells. We were spaced across the entire football field, well over 9 feet apart and then some. And it was just something special to have our band family back together. One of the seniors said, you know, I know it's different, but I don't care. We have something, and this is just awesome. And so we played at the end of the night our school song. It hit me differently. Here is a song that I've heard countless times, a song that can bring our entire football stadium to its feet, a song that can stop our whole student body when it's played in the commons of 2,800 kids to cheer along and clap. And here it was being played for the first time in over 5 months. And we all just kind of took that in under the lights. It was special because it's music that connected us. And it's a music that tells our story of who we are as a community. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to clap to that. I think those of us who are educators know that that touches the heart of what this is. It's about those relationships and the meaningful relationships. And on relationships, our next educator, Korsha Hassan, you are our current Minnesota Teacher of the Year. You share that distinction with the 49 other states and territories, and all of you talk, and you are ambassadors to the profession. Korsha, what would you like to see out of national leadership, guidance or leadership to help make you and your students successful?
Thank you, Governor Walz, for having me. And I want to say Sodowo, which means welcome in Somali. Dr. Biden, I'm very happy that you're here. I'm grateful that you are doing this back to school tour. I encourage you to continue this. We have more to respond to, not just COVID, but we have systemic racism, we have food insecurity that has long plagued our communities. And so I'm hoping that you will be listening to educators from here on out. So as your Minnesota Teacher of the Year, I'm hoping to really shed the issues with equity in our schools. I know that all 3 learning plans really don't meet the needs of our learners, specifically our students of color. And I think that showcased in brick and mortar schools, in which the opportunity gap is still very prevalent, and as well as our high school dropout rates. I'm urging educators all across the nation to really think about how they're starting the school year and making sure that their students of color are supported, and finding ways to make meaningful relationships with them. Something that really filled my bucket yesterday was my school district is doing assessment days. And so the past few days I've been working 12-hour days, assessing students and finding out their reading levels. And I got to meet one of my new students, Suhaila. And I remember when she walked into my classroom, I can tell she wanted to give me a hug. I really wanted to give her a hug, but we did a little elbow tap. And I asked her what she's looking forward to this school year. I said, what do you want out of your 4th grade school year? And she just looked at me and said, I really wanted you to be my teacher. I've been wanting you to be my teacher since May, since I found out that you were a semifinalist, and then a finalist for Teacher of the Year. And then when I found out the news in August, she was like, I knew you were going to be my teacher. I prayed. And so that really made me feel hopeful. It made me feel like even though the stacks are, even though, there are barriers for teaching equitably this fall, I know that Suhaila deserves the best teacher, and I'm going to try my best to be that for her. She also requested that we wear matching hijabs, so I will have to honor that as well. So in terms of really thinking about how to serve all students equitably, I think that we can try our best to meet the needs of our learners by getting to know them, getting to know their needs, and figuring out how to dismantle those barriers. I'm really grateful for Angie Craig, who did a nice little roundtable with my students in the spring via Zoom, which was really interesting. And my students were able to ask her questions. They were really worried about police brutality in Minnesota and wanted to figure out what leaders like Angie Craig were going to do in response to it. And so I'm hopeful that with this back to school tour, that Dr. Biden, that you are really thinking about how to serve all of our educators and making sure that they are being listened to, are being heard and cared for, because while we are kind of on the front lines, we have students that are our main focus and our hope. And so I'm going to end with a little writing from one of my students, Warda, who reminds me of why hope is really important. She says that she finds hope with the sun, the sky, the sunshine, and the book. So I'm going to keep that close to my heart. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Korsha. Our next speaker, Sabrina Tapia Contreras, a teacher here at Prior Lake. This one really moves my heart too, not only an educator, but a parent, and a parent who is concerned about the services their students get and need at school. Gwen and I have a 13-year-old in that same position. So what I would, if you could, Sabrina, to help Dr. Biden understand, can you speak of ways that teachers who are also parents are trying to balance this work? And as the mother of a daughter, What support would you like to see from the federal government during these challenging times to make that easier?
So the really wonderful thing about being a teacher parent is that you really parent all of your students as well. And, when COVID-19 first came through, I saw, these little mini fires kind of being placed in all of the homes of all of my parents. And I did what I know is expected of me as a Minnesotan teacher, and that's rise to the call. I answered every email, every phone call, every opportunity to make that connection with those students. And by doing that, I was in front of the computer many times from 7 a.m. to late at night. So what happened is I was not as available as much for my own children. But I want to talk about who supported me as a teacher during those times, especially for a child who is special needs. My daughter was born 3 months premature. She's a paralyzed vocal cord. She had a PDA ligation, so she has a heart murmur. And I really want to talk about our nurses who called in to check in on her just to make sure that you still have that connection, because she had that connection on a weekly basis. I want to talk about the social workers. And the really cool thing about being a teacher parent is the fact that not only did they check in with my children, but I got to see them check in with my students. And seeing that, even though that their caseload increased, their joy, their stamina never stopped. I want to talk about the speech language pathologists who did their darndest to still make sure they were making those connections and those relationships possible. I want to talk about the ELL teachers who, again, did everything humanly possible to make sure that those students who had those special needs had those services met. And if I could ask of anything for you, is to make sure that we keep those infrastructures. I rose to the call. I made sure that my parents were listened to, my students were listened to. So when I was doing my job, those were the people who were supporting my daughter. And that is so important. It gave me the freedom and the space to do my job to the best of the ability. And I can't imagine where I would be, or I wouldn't be as a successful teacher without them.
Thank you, Sabrina. Dr. Biden, you know this better than anybody that as educators, just sometimes the appreciation of the work and knowing that support's there is what we're really makes it better, really makes the job a little bit easier on those hard days.